So hopefully you're having some fun. We're going to wrap this up with this final third session today. There'll be more tomorrow. Mike will tell you a little bit about that at the end. But one of the things that we talk about a lot, Angel MD, we often get sort of likened to LinkedIn for healthcare innovation. As you've seen, part of what we enjoy, and I think we're pretty good at, is bringing together really good stakeholders, smart stakeholders in various parts of the ecosystem to try to create a more efficient ecosystem overall. And one of the key components of that are investors. Now, for those of us who've had history as in the investing world, Mike is a perfect example of that. We're constantly talking about, really good investors talk a lot about and think a lot about what they don't know. And so the audience and the group that we're going to bring up here are just an example of people we bring into the fold to constantly learn from and to try to figure out our blind spots. Just as an aside, just as happenstance, yesterday I wrote a blog post that I posted on Angel MD. I'll share it in the chat. But it talks about Howard Marks, just as an example, one of the leading investors of the last several decades. We like to learn from people like Howard Marks. And one of the things that Howard says is it's not the things that you know that get you in trouble. It's the things that you think you know that you really don't that get you in trouble. And so this next audience of speakers and panelists are folks that we want to pick their brains, we want to learn from, try to build and extract blind spots out of our investing acumen. So without further ado, I'm going to let Mike introduce the panelists and the individual speakers. I hope you enjoy this third and final session of the Alpha Partners Summit today. Mike, take it away.
Thanks very much, Tobin. Yeah, so the investor and doctor roundtables are always big hits. We are able to gather a wide range of different points of view in terms of what we're looking at. What I'd like to talk today about is let's start off with trends in healthcare in terms of what you're looking for as an investor. So Adonis from Hestia Investments, they are a family office representative firm. When you think about what excites you when you get an email from a startup or when someone says that this is a company that we think you should look at, what are you looking at right now? And then, actually, let's just leave with that. What types of sectors are you most interested at this very moment?
Yeah. First and foremost, Tobin, Mike, thank you for having me. Thank you to the whole Angel MD team. First and foremost, here at Hestia, we like to invest in mid-stage to late-stage companies in the private market for the time being. But things that we heavily look at are just the backlog of who the lead investors were, who they're backed with, and basically look for who the strategic investors were in specific rounds, right? But specifically the industries that I'm just overseeing right now and that I'm drawing the most attention from, or just the most deal flow that's coming in, I would say, is one, psychedelics and genomics, right? These, for some reason, 2019, 2020 was just a massive inflow of capital that came in from, for lack of a better term, really heavy hitters that are going to be changing the psychedelic space and the genomic space in the upcoming years.
Got it. So I find it interesting you talk about psychedelics. That is a good painting you're sitting in front of in order to establish that. So that's perfect. Phil, maybe I'm in Burning Man right now. That's very good. Jason, what about you in terms of the sectors of the field? So Jason's coming at us from Multicare, which actually is an integrated system. Wait, Jason, give me 15 seconds on your guys' business model,
Sure.
Because it's reflective of something we've seen already, right?
Sure. So similar to Mike Phillips at Intermountain, we are structured as a internal venture arm of the Multicare Health System. Multicare Capital Partners is the outfit. We've been doing this for about 18 months. Multicare is a $3 billion health system in the Pacific Northwest. So we function as the vehicle or the conduit to interesting investment opportunities that return something to our patient community. We're also a nonprofit, but also we're looking to infuse entrepreneurial DNA into the health system itself. And so we have both kind of an outward in approach to some of what we look at and an inward out approach to some of what we look at with our investments. And so that's kind of our structure. We're about $75 billion in assets, and we look at anything from $500,000 to a $10 million investment. From time to time, we can go below that. As far as space is concerned, the health system is rapidly shifting from a collection of hospitals, which I think a lot of health systems in this country are really just a collection of hospitals and not a system. And they're shifting into a population health company. So the thing that most rapidly and most broadly gets our attention is anything that speaks to that space. So that could look like access solutions that are technology enabled, access solutions that are provider enabled. It could look like clinical decision support for using AI and machine learning. And what does that do to that process and that ability to manage a population of folks?
Great. So it sounds like you're going to be checking out Uli's book from earlier in terms of proper application of AI for scalable system solutions. So because like not the incremental advantages, but how do you integrate and provide better care to the entire population framework?
Yeah, we think it's center mass for the now, near, and the far in terms
Got
of
it. Well, I was planning on going to Neil, who's from BioVerge, on this sector specific, but I'm going to have to have you wait for a sec, because two of our prior answers here actually had something very interesting in common with them. I asked them what sector they're interested in, and they both gave me operational aspects of their investment thesis first. So that leads us very nicely into Jimmy. Now, Jimmy is the representative from the Opportunity Zone group that Will Walker talked about in our first section. And I asked him here more from an investor standpoint, because I wanted to know, when he's representing someone with investors, what is their priority set in terms of these operational frameworks? So it seems to me like, well, you're going to tell me 100% because you're from an opportunity zone, but walk me through it in that sense.
Yeah, so I know that you heard from Will Walker earlier. He gave a rundown of opportunity zones. I missed it, unfortunately. So I see everything through the opportunity zone lens, and the investors I work with typically have a large capital gain event that they're looking to defer. So we always look at all of our investments for our investor group through that lens of what are the tax benefits associated with this investment. Of course, the underlying deal, whether it's a medical device company or a medical tech company of some sort, is crucially important. You know, are they in revenue? Are they profitable? Do they have a track record? All of those things are very important operationally, but it starts first and foremost with, is this a qualified opportunity zone business, and or can we shoehorn it into that structure?
The reason being, obviously, is that you already get a tailwind at your back with these opportunity zones from their tax treatment, right? So you're getting as much as a 20 or 30% benefit right off the bat.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So, and just if you look at, if from the investor's point of view, you've seen what's happened with the equities market over the past, even just looking at this past year, the S&P 500 is up, I think it's doubled. And especially if you look at over the past decade plus, there's huge capital gains in the stock market alone that haven't really been unlocked yet, that haven't really been realized or recognized, I should say. And then I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the call as well. If you have a business that you are exiting or looking to exit, this offers a huge tax break as an investor to roll over those gains into an opportunity zone deal, typically real estate, but certainly some medical tech companies in there as well.
Let's save the details for the education material on the website, because there's a lot of really technical stuff there and a lot of really interesting thing that Jimmy just hit on. Number one of which is that you can actually harvest past capital gains in terms of investing into these new entities, and therefore defer not only an investment in what you're doing now, but actually save yourself from prior gains taxes as well. But I think what I really wanted to hit on too is the fact that here we have three gentlemen who represented their groups in terms of what they're looking at to invest in. And what you need to know, let's go back to communicating and knowing your audience in these aspects, is that all of these investors have a very specific operational framework. So it's not just about the sector you're in, but knowing the audience about what their operational framework is that they're looking for, find that uniqueness and maybe make sure that you know who you're pitching to in the first place. With that, I'm going to move over to somebody that has less of that operational framework, and we're going to get back to the original topic of discussion, which was, what cool stuff are you looking at out there, and what do you really want to see in terms of sectors?
Michael, thank you for, first of all, the invitation to join the panel discussion. And I think what you guys are doing at Angel & D and Alpha Partners is outstanding, bringing the early stage community together. So With that, I will say at BioVerge, we are early stage investors. And in terms of technology trends that we're seeing within healthcare, there's a number that have emerged recently. Not surprisingly, there's a ton of capital flowing into the biotech early stage ecosystem. We're seeing what have been more traditional public market investors going earlier. Seed rounds are getting pushed up in terms of amount of dollars raised. Series A rounds are getting into the hundred millions of dollars frequently, but that capital is not being equally distributed, right? So there are more and more mega rounds, but there's not necessarily more first-time financings or more companies getting financings. So with that said, some of the trends that we're seeing is certainly within the field of cell and gene therapy, regenerative medicine, right? I mean, we've seen the first wave of gene therapy approvals that are targeting monogenic diseases. There's been a lot of success with, with some of the CAR Ts that have been approved. So I think what we're seeing now are some more of the cell-based therapeutic approaches garnering more interest. Things like iPSCs, for example, other types of regen med approaches, things like exosomes are, I think, pretty popular these days, both in terms of technologies that can help deliver exosomes and therapeutic approaches.
That makes me laugh a little bit because we hadn't heard of exosomes before, say, 6 months ago, and in the last 3 pitch clubs or whatever, it feels like one every week has had something to say about exosomes.
Yeah, so I think they're an interesting alternative to stem cell based therapies. Something I'm familiar with my days at CERN. But the other sort of, I would say, mega trend that we're seeing, particularly in the early stage ecosystem, is what has become known as tech bio. So, right, it's this inversion of biotech, but tech bio. And so these are a whole suite of companies that are overlaying a stack of technology to solve fundamental problems in healthcare, in biology. So it's things like applying artificial intelligence, machine learning to try to make the drug discovery or drug development process more efficient. So, think of the Recursion Pharmaceuticals of the world, right? Zymergen, maybe not a great example given they sort of just imploded on the public markets, but things like using synthetic biology to try to very precisely manufacture specific proteins or enzymes. So I think we're seeing a lot of those types of companies emerge from academia, from various accelerators around there, and they're garnering a lot of investor interest. So it's kind of new nomenclature, this whole tech bio idea. The other thing I'll just point out is I think a lot of the tech bio type companies have what are sort of the scientist or physician turned entrepreneur who are, I think, in today's environment, actually receiving funding. And I think that's very different than what it used to be 5 or 10 years ago, where those types of pedigrees were really relegated to the CSO or CMO role. I think the scientist turned entrepreneur now, the more technical founder, are able to get funding in this environment. So I think that's been an interesting
refreshing.
switch.
That's refreshing because it's not necessarily what we see a lot of. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. When we do pitch club preparation, we very often do run into the technical founder, and it's difficult. It's more difficult to coach them because they're pitching in more like a white paper, or they're not really understanding their audience to the other communication skills aspects. So,
and Michael, I think that circles back to a prior panel discussion, but it's how do you communicate the stories? How do you communicate the narrative, right? Yep. And I think being able to communicate effectively in terms that the investor can relate to and understand is critical, and not getting lost in sort of the deluge of data or, what ex vivo or animal model, data charts, et cetera. And I think we see a lot of technical co-founders going too deep in the weeds too soon, and they lose sort of the forest from the trees. And I think that there's a lot of communication preparation that I think could benefit the particularly scientific or technical co-founders.
Yeah, that certainly suggests that a lot of the mentoring that needs to be done and a lot of the training that needs to be done at the innovation labs and incubators is going to be focusing more and more towards the communication element for these folks, because that's a big hole in the game, as it were.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. The other I think word of caution I'll just point out is because there has been so much capital that has been flowing into the early stage ecosystem, we're seeing some bad behavior, I'd say, from the investor side of the equation, particularly. Okay. So, there's a shocking level of lack of diligence, I think, sometimes. So, for all the entrepreneurs out there, what we typically like to see is, having a data room set up, making sure there are materials available for us to review, to do a deep dive in the diligence. That there's a lot of I'd say companies and CEOs that are trying to pressure investors into moving very quickly and skipping the diligence process. And that's always a red flag in my book.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's like, that's just like, at least ask some of us for an opinion on the damn thing. Oh, sorry, excuse the language, darn thing. But exactly. Okay. You're preaching to the choir on this one, Neil. So on that, I will save this for a further conversation, or else we're just going to sit here and start riffing off of our relative strengths, and that's not going to do anyone any good. I'm going to leave us all with one last question. And I'm just going to say, if you had to learn about any one subject right now to prepare yourself for the investments that you think you're going to be vetting 3 years from now, just give me in a one phrase answer what that is. And so I can move on, and then I'm going to move on to the docs. So I'll start with you, Neil, since you're still pinned to the front page here. One phrase. What are you learning about right now that's going to be relevant 3 years, 5 years from now for your job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually spending quite a bit of time learning about sort of the manufacturing environment in cell and gene therapy. I think that's a lot of where products get tripped up that are in that sector. So manufacturing is critical.
Got it. Thank you. Adonis, next to you. Sorry, I'm taxing Jen here and her ability to get the right person on screen. Adonis, you're up next. What are you learning about?
Yes, so my Wi-Fi cut off when we first initiated the conversation, so I apologize about that. Let me just give a quick background on Hestia. We're opportunistic investors in a sense, right? By no means are we subject matter experts. We work with subject matter experts, right? So I guess the area that is going to be beyond relevant in the next couple of years, I would say, is just genomics in general. So really understanding and familiarizing myself with gene mapping and what it means in each specific branch of which genomics is going to basically come down to and branch off into.
Got it. And actually, we had a conversation just earlier yesterday about, or was it this morning even, about a couple of companies in that space. Jimmy, I know you want to know about which tax opportunities are going to be out there, but if you had to pick a sector in biotech that you knew more about for the next 3 to 5 years, what would it be?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to plug Hall Venture Partners for a second here, and I love what they're doing with their smart toilet at medic.life. So I would say a diagnostic and at-home testing.
Toilets? Okay, at-home testing.
Yeah.
Okay. Way to save yourself. Okay, you get down the drain, so to speak. Very good.
Exactly.
Actually, the toilet is very, very cool.
It's pretty slick. I got to use it a couple weeks ago. It works.
Congratulations on that. Who's a big boy now? All right, very good. So fantastic. Thanks, Jimmy. And by the way, more of that product will be on their website on their tab under the website. It's actually really cool. Jason, how about yourself? You had one thing that you knew more about for the next 3 to 5 years that would make you a better investor.
I'd say probably how AI and ML can help move from clinical decision support to actual adjudication of validated clinical findings, and how that gets implemented into workflow. I think is a fascinating space, both for standardization of quality outcomes, as well as there's a workforce implication to that. And so that'd be what I'd say.
Got it. And are you getting a cut of all these book sales then? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm going to try and negotiate for that after the call.
Yeah, get some work done on that. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That has been wonderful. With that, I'm going to be bringing up our last roundtable of the afternoon, and that's going to be our doctor and clinician roundtable. I have the privilege of working with these guys on a regular basis, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I used to work on Wall Street, most egotistical place on the planet, until I met the doctors. And I mean that as a compliment, Mark, not as an insult. But these guys break that down. I mean, they freely share information. They freely share ideas. I've had wonderful conversations with each one of these guys individually and as a group. I mean, you want to talk about the difference between real value add and someone just that sounds like they know what they're talking about? The second part is me. These guys are the real value add. So thank you so much. As we bring the rest of these guys on, we'll go ahead and kick the conversation off. Mark, I spoke right to you originally, so maybe give us just 15 seconds about what you thought about the content today, because I would love to hear your feedback initially. And then I want to toss the same question to you, the last question that I tossed to the investor group, and that was, what do you want to know more about? You think it's the most important trend in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so Mike, first, really great couple of hours. It's really been a lot of fun. And so I think the take-home message from these last couple of hours is the fact that you really do need a lot of different perspectives, and that's coming from me as a physician. It's not just about the docs. It's not just about the money guys. It's really about understanding that if you have a fruitful idea and you want to see it take hold, you'd better, what we call walk the square. Make sure you understand who all the relevant stakeholders are, get as many allies as you can, get as many connections, make sure you have a broad network. And then, by applying that kind of thinking and finding your blind spots, you're most likely to succeed. So I think that's what I've really valued out of the last couple hours. And that's what I think most people should take away from this. What I'm really interested now is in the field of synthetic biology, really. So it's genomes, but actually beyond genomes, it's how do you manufacture new types of items that we haven't even thought of. Like, for example, trees that glow in the dark so that you don't need street lamps anymore, and using bioluminescence and using natural biologic characteristics of various items and transposing them through synthetic biology. Which
I'm hearing a raging of Franken tomatoes and Franken veggies.
Yeah, no, I think that's the next frontier. That's what's really, if I wanted to learn more about one thing, it's not just conventional genomics. It's the next, how do you actually manipulate it to create things we haven't even thought of?
Like, you're into science fiction then, I guess, Mark, is that right?
It's all science fiction till it happens.
Brilliant answer. Fantastic. I'm going to switch to the next Mark Fine. Now, Mark Fine we met because he actually brought two separate companies in successive weeks to Pitch Club as an advisor. And then since then has kind of like decided he liked the environs, I suppose, and started hanging around more. I thank you for that, Mark. It's been some fantastic conversations we've had, great insights on a lot of different companies. What do you think so far of some of the different content that was here today in terms of what struck you as most interesting that you learned?
Well, it was all insightful, especially about the raising money. So I've worn a lot of hats. I've been a hospital administrator. I've been working in a hospital as a nurse. I've started 5 companies, worked with startups like SRI. And it's actually one of the things, and this was kind of hinted at, and I don't know how direct it was, but in real estate, it's location, location, location. And I think in startups, it's people, who's on the team. And I've run across some really interesting technologies. And one of the questions I ask is the team, like especially as a physician or an engineer, are they assets or liabilities? They could be either. And one of the most valuable things I help out with is, if we need a chief medical officer or we need a CEO, great idea, but you need a team, number one, to get the investment, and because that leads credibility, and also to get over the finish line, because it's really, really hard. It's really hard. So, I just appreciate everything Angel MD does. It just brings people together, and I just hear a lot about neuromodulation these days. We didn't talk about that too much, but that's kind of coming up. And computer-assisted diagnosis and machine imaging, AI, and all that stuff. So I'm just happy to be part of this community.
Yeah, well, me too. You and me both, sir. You said something that was really interesting to me about the difficulty of getting across the finish line. Now, Krish, who I actually spoke for the first time just yesterday morning. Actually, I was on my way to do a site visit at the Allegheny Health Network suburban facility when Krish and I finally spoke on the phone for the first time. And I was just blown away by his initial insights in some aspects of getting companies across the finish line, right, so to speak. Like, that's one of the most stressful points. We think that raising capital in the first place is stressful, but in some cases, getting it across the finish line, closing that final deal. Are you making the right decision? Are you giving up your baby? Are you at the right time? Or should you keep going it out on the loan? And I know you've had a lot of companies with that experience. Could you give me one qualitative story of something that stood out the most, of something that you experienced that would be educational to our audience right now?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Mike and Tobin, for inviting me. I think this is a great platform to connect the clinicians and investors and people who are all interested. So I think that's great. What you guys are doing is really needed. So my perspective is I have worked on both sides of the aisle. As I've said it, I've worked with big companies where I've worked in evaluating the smaller companies and trying to see which one we can, when they're looking to take over or buy or partner. And on the other side, I worked with, companies which are coming up with, interesting technology and then looking for buyers. So the whole challenge is at the moment I'm working with the company which is, developing a really phenomenal endoscopic platform. It's great. It's really something new. So the debate that's going in-house is, do we run with this or do we go and partner with somebody? And the challenge that comes is as we all know, there are the big, the big giants. And question comes is, are the giants going to eat you up and put you on the shelf, or are they going to grow? So that's the whole point. And and I think one of the things is,
Let
with
me
this.
just go back to that moment. I knew what you meant, but I want to make sure everybody else does. Eat you up and put you on a shelf. What do you mean?
So what I mean is sometimes, you might just buy you and then actually not help you grow. I mean, you can buy it because you want to run out the competition. I'm putting it very, very crass or crudely, but I think that
No, it's
that
okay. We see it. We see that in the news in terms of the digital side of the market all the time. Like with Facebook or one of these others, buy out a disruptive technology specifically just to sit on them, right? And you're suggesting the same thing happens in medical technology as well.
And I think that does. And in the device world, I think that does happen. So what is interesting is I think that one of the things that the challenge comes is when you have a company which is coming with the disruptive technology, often where I think we miss out or we don't look at is where the payments come in. So let me put it. What I mean to say is, often as a surgeon, I'll have a company who'll come and tell me, oh, we've got this new technology, we wanted to use it. So I'll say, how much does it cost? They'll say X amount of dollars. So the question comes is, today when hospitals are strapped for funding, so they have, like, for example, when you come for surgery, you have only a certain amount of money that goes in to be paid for that care. So I think you need to figure out, if you don't have a code or a particular code for that, or separate payment for that technology, you're not going to get buy-in from the hospital. For example, if you come with a fancy scissor, if you come with a fancy scissor or a scope, but if it doesn't, all you're doing is you're taking away the profit from the hospital by making them buy it. So if you don't think of these things, you lose out. So I think you got to figure out, how does it fit? What value add are you bringing in? And it's just not, and sometimes we think that just value add is, okay, making somebody's life better. And many times the surgeon's life better is going to get your foot in the door. It's not, because eventually somebody has to pay for it. It has to fit in the whole economics of the healthcare system. And I think these are the challenges which we face.
Got it. And how does that reflect your decision making? I want to get back to that exit strategy. It sounds like it matters, right? Because your bigger company is going to have that to be able to penetrate the healthcare system and prove the value add, whereas a smaller company is a very uphill battle.
That's correct. So now at the moment we are in current, as part of being on the other side of a smaller company, I'm helping these guys position themselves to be attractive to the bigger giant, right? So when you're trying to do that, I think, first of all, having a strong clinical champion is important. I think that's really, really important, because remember, there's somebody like me on the other side. I mean, so the point is, I'm not this side, but there's somebody like me on the other side who's looking critically and trying to poke holes into everything that I'm going to say. So I think having a good clinical champion is really critical. Somebody with credibility is important, and then going to try, because so the cost that for a smaller company, one of the challenges is cost of manufacturing, cost of marketing, cost of, positioning, cost of custom acquisition. So all of these things are really expensive. So I think when you go to a big giant, I think they have all these things set up. So the question is, how do you position your product to fit into the portfolio of that or the portfolio pipeline of that new company? I think that's important. And that's the strategy to try to figure out that you're not just going to try to sell, but figure out which company's portfolio or the portfolio pathway do you fit into. I think that's important to know.
So let me pivot a little bit on that exact question there and ask you something about Intermountain Ventures business model, for example. It sounds like you're a big fan of parts of it, but they are dilutive. You know, they do take warrants and other things out of it, but it sounds like you would say that it's worth it.
Yep.
You would agree. And now I'm actually interested in another aspect of conversations that have come up over the course of the day. And that gets back to the mentor bench conversation we had with David and with the guys from the Innovation Hub then. And engaging your mentor network and making yourself attractive, what types of things would you be looking for if you were sitting in that network and someone said, Krish, we want you to hang around and give us opinions on these companies? Like, tell me about what's attractive or not attractive to that pitch to you.
So you're saying, you mean as a mentor, you're saying what would be attractive as a mentor?
You know, I want to engage you, right? I want to have you talk to my companies on a regular basis. The point is, like David said, it's difficult to find qualified clinician resources that are willing to hang around and have time for you, right? So how do you do that?
So I think the biggest challenge as a physician, and this is something that, you know, I'm quite passionate about, is I think as physicians, I hate to say it, but we don't like sometimes to hear no for an answer. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge we have.
Well, like I said, you are more egotistical than a trader. So there you go.
So I think Mark, you know, I think you would probably agree. I think sometimes it's harder. And I think to be a partner and to be in innovation, you have to be willing to accept that you're going to be wrong. So my first thing is you have to be open-minded. You have to learn to work in a team. Second thing is we need to learn to fail. And I think the problem that when you're looking for a mentor or a clinical mentor, many times our training, our background always teaches us not to fail. Our whole
doctors don't accept the 30% fail rate in their surgeries.
Exactly. So, you know, so we are not risk takers. So we are not risk takers. So I think that's the problem. So I think the right mentor would be somebody who would be, you know, who kind of is willing to take that risk and willing to be open-minded, willing to learn, and willing to share. I think that's the whole thing. So through my journey over all these years, to be honest, I think besides sharing my knowledge, I've learned much more. And I think that's probably what it is. And so it's not just somebody you want. Sometimes the challenge is sometimes you go to the biggest name, and that's what you need, a big name. So for example, you might go to the biggest, let's say, cardiac surgeon in this country, but that person might not necessarily be the best guy for your product. You need that person. And you also need somebody else who'll be willing to work with the team. So I almost think that you need a name and you need somebody who's going to do the work. I don't know if it makes sense.
I saw Mark nodding over here and chuckling even. So I want to I assume you agree to some degree with what Krish has been saying.
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. I mean, the most important thing on either side is curiosity and the ability to listen. I mean, the problem that most founders run into, and the problem that most of us run into, is we fall in love with our own ideas. And so, I do not look for a founder. Like, the one thing I don't want in a company is somebody who's so certain that they found the solution to my problem without having come to me and asked me what my problem was. Right. So, and that's, having seen a number of companies, the ones that fail are the ones that have fallen in love with their solution and have not made an attempt to understand the problems that are being faced by the people who they're trying to help. And I've said this over and over again. If you have, someone said it earlier, if you've got a solution that you're in love with and you're searching for a problem to solve, that's a bad place to be. Make sure you understand the problem of your customer. Make sure you understand who's having that problem, who's going to be happy that it was solved. And then the third thing is, you better make sure you know how valuable that person's happiness is to the organization. Like, who's going to pay to make them happy? And if you haven't solved it for those three things, then I think then my attractiveness, my attraction to your company is less. And then the last thing you touched on throughout the day is something that most entrepreneurs really need help with, which is communication and the ability to concisely tell their story. And I like to use, the mother-in-law test. Like, my mother-in-law, Marion, if I can't explain it to her in one or two sentences, it's not a good idea.
So is Marion on rent so that we can all then test those thesis against her? She's willing to take pitches.
She lives alone. She's happy to talk to anybody. If she can explain your company's story, I'm interested.
All right, that I think is actually a wonderful consultancy job that maybe
She
we can
accepts
set up.
Venmo.
Yeah, exactly. We'll figure out what a hourly rate is and make sure that you guys find out what that the contact information. Thank you, Mark. Mark Fine, you have been a mentor, advisor, and in some cases a paid advisor in those senses for these companies. And what got you involved in those companies in the first place? What made you get off and say, yes, I'm willing to commit real time to that company?
I'm a naturally curious person. So that's both my strength that gets me into some trouble. But, I'm interested in, I got so much help, starting some of my companies. I just feel like I want to pass it on. So when I've been going in and out of retirement, and I get bored. And I've got a really, very low threshold for just getting interested in stuff. So if someone has something that I think is really cool, and I think the people, and I like the people, I get to choose who I want to work with. They're smart and they're nice and they're open and I just feel like it's great. It's about service in a way. And I approached, my dad was a psychiatrist, and I learned his approach, which is I say, so how can I help? And there's an old saying, technical problems are easy, people problems are hard. And most of the companies I work with, it's just kind of like just being a good listener, and being a CEO is very, very lonely. Like, who can you talk to? You can't really, be totally open with your board or your investors or your employees about how terrified you are most of the time. So just being a sympathetic, supportive listener, that can really help. So that's kind of the difference.
Huh? Chris, do you agree with that? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Was there something else, Mark? No, go ahead. Finish up what you're saying. I apologize.
Yeah, and I understand technology and medicine, so I actually have, I speak that language too, so I can kind of understand where they're coming from. So that's what I do.
Got it. But Chris, would you agree with that you got to work on those people skills if you're a mentor coming in with these groups?
No, absolutely. I think that is the most critical thing.
Because Mark Williamson said they don't want to hear no. So how do you tell them?
Yeah, but I think, one of the things I like to tell people is, especially in health, in physicians, every physician, and to Mark's point, every physician has his idea. And if you talk to any surgeon you walk in, he'll give you 10 ideas. All of us do that. And that's basically what it is. You have a solution and you're looking for a problem. That's exactly what all of us do. And I think
all the world, the man with the hammer, all the world is a nail, right?
Exactly. So looking from ideas first to a needs first approach, I think that's a major shift that needs to occur in healthcare, especially when you're looking at clinicians coming with ideas. The other thing I like to tell folks is, 100% of zero is zero. So, that's so everybody likes to hold on to their own thing. And I say, if you want to make 100% and eventually it's zero, it's zero. So you need to share. Don't worry about it. If you get 1% of a successful venture, that's still going to be 1% of something. I think that's, again, it sounds very simple, but I can't tell you how much,
as a serial entrepreneur, I'm sure you'll have opinion on this as well. 1% of 100% win sets you up to do it again with better equity returns next time, right? Because you've got a success under your belt.
Yeah. And Dan Millman said a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So I kind of like that.
Absolutely. But we've seen that time and again is that, everybody says he's a serial entrepreneur. He's a serial, Chris, you're a serial entrepreneur. It's like, Mark, you're a serial entrepreneur. That covers both Marks. But the point being that there is something about, it came up actually twice even during this conversation about the personality set. With Chris, you're talking about risk aversiveness with the willingness to accept other people's solutions. But there is something about that personality set in the serial entrepreneur that strikes out for these things. And once you've done it once, you gain the validation of that you can do it again. So don't worry too much about winning everything on your first try. Get in there and do it again. Right, guys?
Yep.
You say that? So if you had to pick one skill set, that's a terrible question because the answer is all of them. All right, we're not going to go there. But if you had to pick, all right, here we go. If you had to pick one skill for each of you, right, that you wanted to educate yourself more on. This is not topics. This is not like what I said with the investors of a sector that you want to do. I'm saying a skill, communication, management, whatever. Look into your soul. What do each of you guys want to learn more about yourselves in order to make yourself better at what you do? I'll go with Froyamson first because he's on my right.
Yeah, I have really become a big fan of trying to become a better communicator. And by the way, I think you're doing a great job. I've never seen you do this with such great skill. So you need to get like a talk show or something. But listen, at the end of the day, it's all about language. It's about meaning. It's about understanding. And all of those things come through proper communication, understanding. So it's less about the finance skill set or the science skill set. There's always somebody around who can do that. But the nature of humanity is being able to understand one another and communicate effectively. So that's something that I'm trying to work on at this point.
Got it. Well, I think Logan and Kathy are going to owe you guys some, commissions as well. Uli, Logan, they're the big winners this evening. That's fantastic. Chris, would you agree, or do you have a different thing that you want to work on?
I do, but I agree with the communication part, but I think it's the being concise. And I love the your mother-in-law analogy, because I think that's what it is. Sometimes, I love talking, and I think the problem is, I'd like to learn to say the same thing in three words what I need 10 words. And I think that's probably, if you ask me what I'd like to learn.
Got it. Yeah, me too. I'm a fire hose. I'm a waterfall. So conciseness would be a good skill for me to learn. How about yourself, Mark? Fine.
Yeah, they say, facts don't convince people, stories do. So I want to become a better storyteller.
Got it. So again, communication. Well, that's wonderful. You know what? That is a wonderful place for us to end the evening. And I thank everybody for joining us. I thank all of our speakers for their wonderful contributions. And you know what? I love talking to these guys one-on-one. I like them better in a group. What does that say about me? I don't know. That's a little bit weird. But I'm going to leave it off to Tobin to close out the evening and thank everyone. I really appreciate it. I hope you all stay around for networking, where we will have opportunities to continue these conversations. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. And again, thanks, Dr. Froyamson and Mark and Dr. Gatanda. It's great to have you guys involved. I like wrapping up with our physician team because they really are the heart and the center of Angel MD's community. As Mike alluded, one of the reasons we moved to the AirMeet platform not long ago is because it facilitates these neat interactions afterwards. So after the session closes here in a minute, you'll see rooms open up, and there will be different room designations. Just have some fun, pop in there. We find people really enjoy this because it does mimic kind of a live networking opportunity in some respects. We also, just as a reminder, have pitch club events every 2 weeks. In the follow-up email, you'll get some information about the next sessions. We love those sessions because they are a great opportunity to hear from innovative companies. And again, one of the great things about the Angel MD community is the physicians and dentists that get on these particular presentations and ask really pointed and terrific questions. So thanks again to all of our panelists, speakers, amazing group. There's going to be a lot of information provided about their organizations, the way to contact them. So look for the email on that tomorrow. We do have another session to wrap up tomorrow. And so we look forward to seeing you all. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you in the networking session here in just a second. Thanks, Mike.